contemporary perspective. We have already studied the two management approaches which was there in this block, contemporary perspective. First was the new public administration or new public management approach, and second was the good governance approach. We will further move on with the other two approaches, that is the post-modern approach and feminist approach. Now, public administration has undergone a substantial transformation in the political, social, economic, and cultural spheres across the world. Factors including the development of information technology, telecommunication, computing, liberalization of trade, deregulation of financial and banking system, growth of translation and cooperation, and so on. Now, this unit will try to explain the changing role of state and public administration in the globalization context. We will examine the genuine of NPA as a new administrative model and also critically evaluates its relevance and characteristics. We'll quickly go through the two other approaches we have done in the previous class, that is the new public administration approach. The new public management approach is basically the impact of NPA, which was the public choice approach, principles agent approach, and transactions cost approach. These approaches were there in the new public management approach. The conceptual framework of MPA was to complementing managerial along with policy making skill and to adopt private sector managerial practices by public sector, setting explicit measurement performance standard for public organization, controlling the performance of public organization by predetermined output measures, contracting out private ownerships and completion of public service provisions, making services more responsive to the needs of the customer and ensuring value of money, using information technology to facilitate better service delivery, focusing on achieving results rather than primarily confirming with the processes, and making public administration customer driven to enhance public employee to serve the customers as it promotes teamwork were the basic characteristics of NPA. It also levied on stress on the changing the overall public administration culture towards flexibility, innovation, entrepreneurship, enterprising as opposed to rule-bound process orientation and focusing on inputs rather than results. While public administration is based much more on political science and law, NPA draws heavily on economics and business administration. NPM is that form of strategy including a series of methods and techniques that aim at government reforms. That was the new public administration approaches. Now, the model conceptualized has the following 10 forms in the NPA, that is was there in the reinventing government forms of NPA. The 10 forms were the first was the catalytic government, second was the community oriented government, third was the competitive government, fourth was the mission driven government, fifth result oriented government, sixth was the customer driven government, seventh was enterprising government, eighth was anticipatory government, and ninth was decentralized government. 10th, market oriented government. These 10 were the government form of the NPA, which was basically founded changes by the Ostrobel and Gabler considered these fundamental changes as necessitated by the crisis situation, which require people with vision, leadership qualities, and support. These were the basic 10 forms of government. Now we need to look beyond new public management reform in order to strive towards blending of economic and social value. Evaluating and adapting a new administrative framework, it is necessary that each country examine its feasibility as per clearly formulated reform objective. Examine suitable prerequisites from reform and create a conducive atmosphere for its implementations. That was the new public management approach. Next we had gone through was the good governance approach. In order to understand the concept of good governance, we have already discussed this approach in in wider respect. I will just briefly go through it. In we must be clear about the wider concept of state, which includes government and governance. Government is the major constituent of state, as it is an instrument through which state strives to accomplish its goals and objectives. While the citizens are also becoming conscious of their rights and responsibilities, there is an increase in the level of their expectations, and as a result, the need for good governance has become crucial. In this unit, we shall discuss the concept of state and the changing nature of task of government, which has led to the changing nature of governing to governance. The form of government to governance was this political institution that sovereign judicial within defined territory, border and exercises authority through a set of permanent institutions including parliament, judiciary, bureaucracy and so on. The present day economics are the undergoing a significant transformations and the boundaries across nations are disappearing leading to the excessive interconnection. The role of the state in core area, big questions due to the failure of government in tapping some priorities areas. Hence this has resulted in government which has all along been the major provider of services to withdraw from certain areas, enabling the private sector as well as people's initiatives in the form of civil society organizations to expand their areas of operation. The practice of public administration, which has been dominated by the government, is giving way to a networking between government market and collective group of peoples commonly referred to as civil society. The present concept of governance looks at government interacting with various segments of society and economy to arrive at mutually accepted decision. We shall discuss the concept, significance and features of governance in the next sections or maybe the further on. The concept and features of governance, according to the interpretation, governance has the four main components. That is the first is the public sector management, second is the accountability, third is the legal framework for development, fourth is the transparency and information accessibility. These are the four main components of governance. Governance all depends upon the three pillars of constitutions, namely the executive, legislature, and judiciary. The legislature formulates the law, the executive implements the law, while the judiciary interprets the law. Governance basically attempts to promote collaborations working together by the government, markets, and people. It aims at maximum good for the maximum number of people, which cannot be achieved only by the government but also other public as well as private organizations and even civil society organizations. So this was the governance, which has four main components. The characteristics of good governance, we have discussed it already. I'll just say the basic characteristics of good governance is public sector management, in which World Bank also outlines certain basics of good governance, which operates that operation of rule of law that involves adequate law to ensure personal security and facilitate the functioning of market, which are adequately enforced through an independent and predictable judiciary and the absence of the official corruption. The policy environment which facilitates economic growth, poverty reduction. This includes sound microeconomics and fiscal policy. Adequate investment in people involving good elevations of public expenditures between and within sector is also the characteristics of a good government. Also protecting the vulnerable of affordable and targeted safe three nuts and generally ensuring an appropriate poor emphasis in public expenditure. Protecting the environment by ensuring that economic growth does not cause environmental degradation. To conceptualize and governance and postulate its basic characteristics. So the basic characteristics of good governance would be participation. rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability, predictability. We have already discussed it earlier. Brower and Lofer 2003 bring out 10 characteristics of good governance. That was the first was the citizens in engagement, second was transparency, third was accountability, fourth the equity, gender and social inclusion, fifth was the ethical and honest behavior, sixth was equity, that is fair procedure and due processes, seventh was the ability to compete in a global environment, eighth ability to work efficiently in a partnership, ninth sustainability, and 10th was the respect for the rule of law. That was the 10 characteristics, but in 2003, that was by the Broward and Lofer, given by Broward and Lofer in 2003. Good governance aims at improving the quality of life of the citizen. It also aims at enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of administration and providing citizen friendly and citizen caring administration, ensuring accountability, using information technology based services to improve citizen government interface, also improving, enhancing the productivity of employees, and promoting organization pluralism, state, market, and civil society organization or governance. Good government aims at achieving much more than efficient management of economic and financial resources of public services. It is a broad reform strategies to make government more open, responsible, accountable, and democratic, regulate private sector, and strengthen institutions of civil society. That was the basic aims of good governance. There were many issues and challenges also which came across good governance. Uh, that was the strengthening the institution of governance, improving the functioning of civil service and bureaucracy. That was the these were the challenges. Ensuring the citizens with establishing an independent and accountable judiciary, making the private sector accountable, education and citizens about their rights and obligations. Economic government needs to be given importance was the basic challenges. Good governance has to pay attention to the several key issues in political, economic, and civil spheres. Political governments needs to be strengthened through ensuring appropriate decentralization methods, making elected representatives responsive and accountable to citizens, strengthening their capacities through education, awareness, and training, conduct of regular, periodic, and fair elections, impartial judiciary, and improving functioning of civil services. These were the basic challenges of good governance. In a continuous process through which conflictual and diverse interests are accommodated, cooperative action is fostered in formal and informal institutions, but in power to promote good public in India, the formulation of citizen charter, redressal of public grievances, right to information, people's participation, and so on are the initiatives in this direction. Now we will further move on to our other approach, that is the postmodern approach. The search for alternative approach to public administration was carried owned by challenging the ideas of the modernist paradigm through modern postmodern lenses, with the hope to build alternative approaches that are sensitive to value and subjective to human behavior. The proponent of postmodern perspective emphasized the public part of public administration. In this unit, we shall discuss the concept of modernity. We will examine the idea of postmodernism and its intersection with public administration. It will also explain the postmodern alternative within public administration. A brief understanding of modernity is the modernity is a product of the Enlightenment age in the 18th century in Europe, which inspired the philosophers, theorists, and scientists for a society laden with universal truth and justice. As it is commonly understood, modernization is a process of development which implies advancement through progressive changes and can find the roots of modernization or modernity in the domains of art, natural science, law, economics, and government within the old values or superstitions and instinct were replaced by science and reason. The post-industrial revolution had been the area of industrial reforms within different strategies were adopted to bring about maximum productivity and efficiency. The period from the early 19s to the early 1960s were highly influenced by Taylor's scientific management, Weber's bureaucratic model, Wilson's political administration dictum, and Simon's organizational rationalities. And these models proved efficient in those days. The cons of public administration can be understood from the organizational and societal perspective. Firstly, in the context of public administration, Burgos 2005 find the period of modernity is characterized by the rationalization, centralization, bureaucratization, specialization, and industrialization. Secondly, owing to the social problem in terms of ill health, unemployment, social insecurity, and environmental degradation in the development as well as developing nations. Scholars countered the prevailing idea of PPA as being insensitive and disconnected from the social reality and hence explored alternatives to break down organizational system and rigid pattern of thinking. In this line of thought, the objective of bridge the gap between theory and practice opened the door for more people-centric perspectives, which eventually came under the rubric of postmodernism. The prevailing orthodoxy in traditional public administration, we'll just discuss through it. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, scholars in public administration challenged the mainstream ideas of organizational rationality to the changing political, economic, social, cultural, and technological context. Herbert Simon, the foremost advocate of rational model, hypothesized that in the study of administrative behavior, individual or group preferences may not be considered scientific and organizationally efficient, with the ambition to achieve a scientific status of the discipline of public administration, the proponent of positive view appreciated the knowledge acquisite of processes in natural sciences and justified its relevance in these social sciences. However, the critics of positive view have pointed out that the describing human behavior by the mere observation could undermine the meaning of human experiences in terms of intuitions, emotions, and feelings. The prevailing view on one best way of doing things was replaced by multiple ways of organizing, formulating, and formulating programmatic goals. Therefore, scholars look for an alternative approach to counter the inadequacies posted by TPA. In the following section, we will try to understand the conditions under which people question and contradict as prescribed by the modernist paradigm. Factor for the rise of postmodernism. Why there was a need for postmodernism. Let us now understand why postmodernism challenged the ideas of modernity, Pesa, positive, empiric, and legal, rational, etc. First reason was the factor was the declining trust in science and government. Despite this success of scientific culture and secure humanism, the quest for achieving certainty did not solve the social mysteries. For instance, public administration scholars observed by the late 1960s since the modernization, doctor failed to improve poverty and social equity. And optimism of people in government stated warning and subsequently signs of apathy are displayed. This scenario eventually challenged the popular belief that science and technology will be a panic for all human and societal evils. That was the first factor. that is declining trust in science and government. Second factor was the social fragmentation, which increasingly magnitude of global capitalism. There has been the widespread issues of the social fragmentation within the community. Ethnic groups, cultural and regions, people around the world are more interested in expanding their networks through technology and association at the neighborhood and community levels. Bios described Bongons described that such a network tends to lose their rational focus and replace the value of modernity, bizarre centralization, collectivism, and nationalization with the decentralization. Third factor was the contextuality. With increase in social fragmentation and great people's voice and choice, scholars observe a trend of relativism and uncertainty in this society. Although these perspectives are culturally embedded and legitimate individualism, their success lies in facilitating the process in which public system could work such a social mobilization efforts culminate in the passage of Right to Information Act in 2005. Fourth factor was the spectism. Now, spectism, the postmodernism is spectacle about modern political representations and elites culture on the grounds that they are arbitrary in promoting vested interests and in including the complexities of the society. For instance, the Green Revolution in Asian countries, which eradicated widespread famine, has also been widely criticized for the causing environmental degradation, income inequalities, and undermining local social economic conditions. Such negative occurrence made postmodernist specialists about the legitimacy of imported policy and their impact on the native population. That was the fourth factor, factism. Fifth was the preference for small and local. The scenario of social fragmentation and widespread speculatism over imported policies and ideologies from the West, Box has opened that people display less interest in national and international events and demonstrate natural inclinations toward which is closest to them, such as local associations of community affairs. In the year 2002, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, decided to include civil society for greater participation in empowering local communities through community radio stations. Some of the other examples may include marathons for social causes, voluntarily for environmental conservation, neighborhood crime watch, residents welfare associations, community radio, etc. The factor was the paradox of globalization. Now, postmodernism did not arise as an event of individual occurrence, rather, it emerged out of cumulative effects of the above mentioned reasons in the late 20th century. Postmodern ideas are wide range and hence it is impossible to condense the basic tenets of Oscar modelizations in a particular way. Cunliffe 2008 points out that the key idea that underline postmodern approaches are as follows. One is no fixed and commonly understood external society social reality. Next was the organization are created and maintained by a minority of individuals who have power over the majority. Then postmodernists believe that knowledge does not lead to enlightened civilization and process, rather it only leads to the demonstrations and marginalizations of groups. Next one, meanings are not fixed in words but dependent on how they are used in particular context. We need to reconstruct text to uncover different assumptions, hidden power relations, and how groups are marginalized and suppressed. These were the basic postmodern approaches underlined by Clufin in 2008. The postmodern theorists believe in the idea of discourse the notion that common problems are more likely to be resolved through the process of discussion and consensus building. In the next section, we will understand the role of postmodern approach in the context of public administration. The postmodern alternative with public administration, there are many postmodern trends in public administration theory. Let us discuss some of them. The first is the organizational humanism. Organizational humanism, F.W. Taylor, and his scientific management approach argues for one best way of doing things, an organization to achieve maximum efficiency, and describes organization as highly mechanical environment where workers are interested in salary and favorable working conditions. By the mid 1960s, retiring the human relation movement organization, humanism perspectives in public administration started emerging. That was the first administrative theory. Organizational humanism. Second was the new public administration, NPA. The deliberalization carried out by the scholars reacted critically to the positive traditions and proposed the new public administration, NPA. The core idea of postmodern public administration can be traced in NPA and summarized then in the words of Marini in 1971 as follows. Uh, In the words of Marini, public administration and public agencies are not and cannot be neither neutral or objective. Because the bureaucratic hierarchy is often inefficient and as an organizational strategies and technology is often dehumanized. Third was the cooperation, consciousness, and democratic administrations are more likely than simple exercise of administrative authority to result in organizational effectiveness. And modern concept of public administration must be built on postmodern behavior and post-positive logic that is more democratic, more adaptable, and more responsive to the changing social, economic, and political context. On the whole, the tenets of NPA gave a clear call for a radical orientation of public administration in terms of relevance, innovation, personal morality, and ethics, and reconciling public administration and democracy. Particularly to build NPA as an undeniable paradigm for improving its administrative practices. Secondly, based on the theme of social constructivism, the scholar aspired to make sense of social realities constructed by human beings in their everyday experiences. Conversations, written texts, etc. are unlike TPA. The focus of public administration gradually shifted from the organizational structure to organizational realities. In the showing subsection, let us discuss the prominent traits of postmodern theories as referred in public administration. Traits of postmodern theory. Postmodernism challenges the traditional approaches to thinking. The knowledge acquisition has been followed a host of qualitative methods like dialect, historical analysis, etc. Wagons in 2005 present the traits of postmodern public administration theories as dialectic, deconstructions, deterritorializations, and imagination and altering. These are the four postmodern public administration theories by Bogons, Baghason in 2005. Dialectic. According to June 2006, dialectic is a method of humanizing and democratization organizational processes by recognizing the participation of individuals in interpreting the meaning of the content. Thus, dialectical approach provides opportunities to explore alternatives to overcome the limit of institutional definitions. Next was the deconstructions. Reconstruction is a Deconstruction is a postmodern method of analysis that intends to critically analyze decentralizing tendencies of TPA as well as to understand the changing nature of diverse society. Next was the deterritorization. Deterritorization neglects the modern understandings of representations, which plain scientific propositions and present the presence of community radio stations, as mentioned in subsection, is an appropriate example of the deterritorization. Next was the imagination. According to Frederick Sun in 2015, imagination is an important element of postmodern public administration because of its usage of metaphor, images, allegory, stories, and parables. These aspects enables people to find alternative ways of thinking instead of generalizing. It is the imagination. Next was the alterity. According to Borgeson, 2005, the term alternity means the moral stance that counter the concept of standard bureaucracy efficiency. It implies that every act of administration directly or indirectly affects another person, whether beneficiary or social or any other stakeholder. That is the alternary according to Borgeson in 2005. These were the traits of the postmodern theory. Postmodern ideas and practices. A phenomenological approach. They were basic ideas and practices which were there in postmodern. We'll just discuss through it. Phenomenological approach. First was that the effect of TPA in public administration, which was instead while ridden the identity crisis, resumed striving by the advocates of phenomenological approach. Phenomenological approach is a philosophy which holds that reality consists of the lived experiences of individuals, of the meaning individual arbitrary of specific objects. Next was the interpretive theory. According to June 1997, the interpretative and critical perspectives of public administration was highly influenced by women. The interpretive theory encountered Herbert Simon's decision-making theory on the critics that while making decisions, accurate representations of reality can seldom be separated as facts and values. The next idea or practices was the critical theory. The root of critical theory can be traced in the writing of Marx's view on power, conflict, and control. Therefore, critical theory, according to Box, provides an opening for conceptualizations and practices that acknowledges the value-based normative character of public administration. When perspective is evident in postmodern arguments against modernity in terms of its narrative related to workers' issues and concerns. Next is the discourse analysis. Discourse analysis, Fox and Miller in 2007 approach to most modern public administration encourages the development of an authentic discourse within society. They have put forth that the goal of the proposed discourse could not be determine what is true rather than answer the question what should we do next. Then discourse analysis basically levied on the goals of the proposed discourse, that is, what could we determine what is true rather than to answer the question what should we do. Next is the feminist discourse. Camille Stryver, in her book Gender Images of Public Administration 2002, has described that women have been paid less struggle to accommodate themselves to the organizational practices and fought to balance her job with the organizational and domestic front. Hence, the poor of postmodern discourse seeks to understand the image of gender in public organizations. Strivers describe that the image of public administration as guided hero or high-profile leader are thought to be masculine, whereas the applications of fairness, compassion, benevolence, and civil mindedness are considered feminine. So these were the ideas. Major focus of postmodern approach to public administration. Dialogue and participatory governance. Postmodern scholars support actions, research frameworks in public administration that promote dialogues, learnings, sharing, and participatory like participatory rural appraisal (PRA). It is an approach that provides a platform to the village population, women, poor people, school teachers, volunteers, youth, farmers, etc., to represent their problems visibly on the ground or on paper, either in the form of map or symbols or any three-dimensional models. That was the major focus of postmodern approach to public administration. First was the dialogue and participatory governance. Next was the direct citizens participation. Grassroots campaign in India also use social audit as a tool to fix the problem of corruptions by the beneficiaries in the rural employment sector due to the pioneer efforts of SK. Social audit was successfully incorporated into the statutory provisions under National Rural Employment Guarantee Act (NREGA), and citizens keep track of misappropriations of funds. Thus, the rise of civil society as agents and partners of development opened up the avenue for most transparent and accountable governance. With the implementations of the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, the local governments could constitute Gram Sabha, that is village council meeting in the village to ensure people participation in village level planning. That that was how direct citizen participation was done. Next was from national nation building to networking. If nation building was the traditional public administration, networking forms the key characteristic features of postmodern public administration. Fredrickson 2015 has observed that nation building could be effectively replaced by societies that find meaning in connections and association, where the networks become as significant as the individual. He has further stated that in a postmodern world, even the most powerful countries will not have the capacity to serve its citizens. With the inclusion of information and communication technologies, the time and space is compressed while eventually stimulate for finding new ways of communication network. These were the three major focus of postmodern approach to public administration. First was the dialogue and participatory governance. Second was the direct citizens participation. Third was from national nation building to networking. Beyond postmodernism in public administration, we can certainly say that the discipline of public administration can never be reduced to certainties as those found in natural science due to the interaction of humans with the society. It can be constructed that the scholars of postmodernism disagree for a unified theory of recommended the future scholars not to look for one appropriate methodology. White in 1999 divided public administration scholars to apply appropriate methodologies based on the research questions that they look forward. First was, he stated that if the research questions pertain to why things have occurred in such a way and look for explanations of events and predicts how it would occur in the future. Second was the explanative research could be utilized. Secondly, if the research is about what is going on here, then interpretive research could be used. Thirdly, critically research could be used if the researcher is faced with ideology or psychology or historical abilities or abilities. In some white in the historical ambiguities, in some the white in 1999 the comments as well as whatever question we face we must properly align an approach that will address the question most appropriately. Indeed, the general agreement among the postmodern scholars has been that the discipline of public administration in the present as well as in future will resolve or revolve around practical applications of solving problems in a highly volatile and fragmented situations. That was the what we think beyond postmodern in public administration. Now we will further move on to the next unit, that is the feminist approach. Feminism is a methodology of investigations. It is more likely a theoretical method trying to explain, re-describe the reality. When we talk of feminist perspective of public administration, three factors become prevalent. First, the inclusion of women-friendly policies and governance. Second, participation of women in public administration. And third, a change of attitude to the issue of gender in administration. The third factor is most crucial and is this the central theme of this unit. This unit would explain the feminist approach to public administration. It would deal with issues concerning the role of the gender and governance by highlighting the parameters of gender analysis and governance. Finally, the unit would look into the direction in which the allegedly hostile administrative state must be head so as to be equally hospitable to both men and women. Understanding from a feminist perspective, the management approach of public administration with its prescription of reinventing government made an elaborate case of transforming bureaucratic government into an entrepreneur. The first was the invention of project is significant in that it challenges the Webinar model of bureaucratic organization as the taken for granted reality of administrative life. However, what is amazing, even more significant, is the fact that from these scholars have long imagined alternative to bureaucratic model much before the reinvention project became fashionable and with the publications of the report of the National Performance Review in 1993, Clinton administration. There are several dimensions to the feminist reappraisal of public administration, well supported the cause of a gender-inclusive public administration. This unit would first define the feminist theory and try to investigate the concept of gender of governance, explore the extent of how administrative power, institutions, and policies are organized around femininity and masculinity, male dominance and female subordinates, attempt but also be made to investigate the governance of the gender concept. The content to which administrative policies set the rules and circumstances that not only regard and reward but also reproduce the positions women and men as different and unequal. The crucial of the argument is that gender relation cannot be understood apart from the administrative state. Administrative state influence gender relations and are in turn influenced by gender relation. Feminist approach. A feminist is someone who is identified with gender as a crucially useful category of analysis which take a critical perspective of women's current status and prospects to use gender render words believe in a system of ideas and practices which assume that men and women must share equally in the work, in the privileges, in refining and dreaming of the world. Feminism is not one unitary concept but instead a diverse, multifaceted grouping of ideas and actions. Despite the fact that feminist movement includes different and even contradictory political viewpoints, liberal, Marxist, socialist, radical, postmodern, to name a few, nevertheless, all have a firm faith in the equality of men and women and are committed to the elimination of gender-based injustice. Gender is a part of organizational fabric of society based on perceived differences in accordance with one's biological, sex, and social economic identity. The octaves of gender is not on women as per, but on power relation between men and women. Their access to resource and decision making power. Gender of governing. The central mechanism by which is exclusion of realized in the assumption of natural separation between public and the private. It is assumed that political is public and that the private realm of is the domestic of family, and sexual relations lies outside the proper concern of the study of politics. In other words, with politics restricted to the public sphere of human life and perceived as an arena of male activity, the private or personal realm, by contrast, has come to be seen as a sphere of several reserved for women. Feminist theory in the later half of the 20th century began to realize how potent this duality was for the ways in which male and female role are constructed and the meaning by which women from the very understanding of what is political may be excluded or simply made invisible. Thus began a re-evaluation of many male-created theories, principles, concepts, institutions, including those of politics and administration. The sense of that argument is that gender is about power. Through gender relations between people created and reinforce the distinction between masculinity and femininity. The governance for gender. First, we had done gender for governance. Now is the governance for gender. The feminist writer not only explores the male bias of the administrative state, they also assesses the effect of such an administrative state that its policies on men and women. They try to show that an administrative state which is gendered hierarchy produce inequality and assign different life changes to men and women and enforce material reality that obsess women. A feminist approach to public administration includes calling those state boundaries into questions that differentiate capabilities, potential qualities on the basis of gender, giving preferences to reign over females. It also means exploring the implications of these attitudes in governance. Parameters of understanding gender in administration. The analysis of extent to which gender is embedded in the very structure of organization and the extent to which it is figured in the world view. Policies of administration has exposed the exclusion of women from political world. The feminists, however, argue that true equality cannot be achieved by just adding a woman to traditional theories, but that the very basis of the theories must be challenged. According to they examine the analysis of several issues areas in public administration that call for a new configurations and offer a new version of the spectrum of the feminist ideal, which promises to be fruitful in sparing public administrative theories and practices. The first parameter was the ethic of justice. Politics has to be understood as power politics conflictual rather than conceptual. The feminists argue in favor of extending the range of moral reasoning as so to include another form of reasoning called the ethic of care, which ought also to be recognized. In Carlo Gillison's 1982 view, women have a different perceptions of morality, a morality of responsibility, whereas men have a morality of right. Feminist scholars like Gilligan Norway endorse the rejection of ethics of justice in the favor of an ethic of care. Rather, they want the ethic of justice to be tempered by an ethic of care. Their belief is based on the conviction that the recognition and acceptance of a different voice is crucial to the transformation of public bureaucracies. Next was the expertise. Feminist theories have drawn upon the contribution to the debate about the image of expertise in public administration, but feminists regret that generally speaking there has been tendency to banish norms which are culturally recognized as feminine, such as passivity, comprehension, and vulnerability from public life. Thus, creating an approach wherein public administrators, both men and women, seek ways to appear technically expert, tough, and hero. heroic. In other words, to project a more masculine component image. The conventional idea of expertise also privileges a notion of autonomy over and above the public service obligations to be politically responsive. From the feminist perspective, such ideas of expertise block connectivity and affiliations to the administration with the world around them. The feminist position on the above mentioned themes arises questions that bear directly on organizational theory. The feminists are developing alternative methods of organization based primarily on their experiences in the women's movement. They also challenge dominations by superior through hierarchical patterns on the grounds that it is restricted the growth of individual members. The potential impact of the feminist critiques of the key concept of public administration promoted Robert Dilhart and Jan Powell to predict the dimensions of the administrative man and argue the adoption of an alternative model based on the organizational values of women's movement. In this unit, we have made an attempt to explore the feminist approach to this specific aspect of administration. Feminist perspective of public administration till today remains shamefully neglected and has not received the enthusiasm it warranted. Providing insight into the issues of gender equality, feminists ask provocations questions such as what is meaning to be a man or a woman in various cultures, economic or social systems. They believe women have always been at the receiving end and subjected to various negative stereotypes. Also, that women have not got a fair share in government. They challenge the prevalence paradigm of bureaucratic culture and administrative states. Feminist scholars seek to overcome this masculine bureaucratic culture which has been technically in orientations based on their experiences. They have developed an alternative perspective of public administration and provided a reappraisal of administrative concepts such as ethics, expertise, and leadership, etc. The effort has been very simple to build a persuasive case for a feminist perspective to public administration. This was the feminist approach. Now we'll quickly go through all the four approaches we have gone through in block 5. To conclude this session, we'll quickly go through block 5 which we have covered in our previous and this class. First, in block 5, that is contemporary perspective. First, unit 14 that we have studied was the new public management approach. New public management approach, what was the impact of new right philosophy? That first was the public choice approach, principal agent approach, transaction cost approach. This was the basic ideas. The conceptual framework of NPA was focusing on result rather than primarily conforming with the processes, making administration custom driven to enhance service ethic and efficiency, empowering employee to serve the customers as it promotes teamwork, using information technologies to facilitate better service delivery. That was the conceptual framework of NPA. Reinventing government, the model they conceptualized were in 10 forms. First was the catalytic government, community-oriented government, competitive government, mission-driven government, result-oriented government, custom-driven government, enterprising government, anticipatory government, decentralized government, market-oriented government. These were the 10 conceptualized form of models in reinventing government. Next was the impact of NPA. The impact of NPA was clash of values between tradition and new public administration. Next was the contradictory nature of factor underlying reinventing government. Reinforcement of public administration doctrine. That was the impact of NPA reforms. Next was the approach was the good governance approach. In order to understand the concept of good government, we must be clear about the wider concept of state, which comprises government and governance. Government is a major constituent of state, as it is an instrument through which the state strives to accomplish its goals and objectives. The concept and features, basic features according to the interpretation, governance has four main components. First was the public sector management, second was the accountability, third was the legal framework of development, fourth was the transparency and information accessibility. These were the four interpretation of governance. Characteristics of good governance, as by the World Bank, outlines certain basics of good governance, which includes operation of rule of law, policy environment which facilitates economic growth and poverty reductions, adequate investment in people involving good elevations of public expenditures between and within sector, protecting the environment by ensuring that economic growth does not cause environmental degradations. That was the characteristics of good governance. We can move. Basic characteristics were that was participation, rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability and predictability. Beveridge and Loeffler in 2003 bring out 10 characteristics of good governance. First was the citizens' engagement, transparency, accountability, equity agenda and social inclusions, ethical and honest behavior, equity, ability to compete in the global environment, eighth, the ability to work efficiently in a partnership, ninth, sustainability, and tenth was the respect for the rule of law. That was the good governance approach. Next, we had gone through was the postmodern approach. The postmodern approach was the prevailing orthodoxy in the tradition of public administration. Factor for the rise of postmodernism was first was the declining trust in science and government. Second was the social fragmentation. Third was the contextuality. Fourth was the spectrism. Fifth was the preference of small and local. And sixth was the paradox of globalization. Alternative within public administration of the postmodern was the organizational humanism, and second was the new public administration. Traits of postmodern theories were dialect, deconstruction, decharacterizations, imagination, alternative. Ideas and practices were phenomenological, interpretative theory, critical theory, discourse analysis, feminist discourse, etc. Last approach was the feminist approach. Feminist approach. Feminist approach we have studied was that the feminist scholar seeks to overcome this masculine bureaucratic culture, which has been technical in orientation. Based on their experiences, they have developed an alternative perspective of view public administration and provided a pre-appraisal of administration. Very simple to build a persuasive case for a feminist perspective to public administration. So these were the four approaches that we had covered in block 5. First was the new public management approach. Second was the good governance approach. Third was the postmodern approach, and fourth was the feminist approach. With this, we will conclude this session on public administration, BPCA 131, perspective on public administration. Block 5 was the last block of this course, BPCA 131, perspective on public administration.